Once again, a very warm welcome to all of our attendees this morning. We want to say thank you very much for joining us, as well as all the feedback that we have received from you over the past week. Few questions that we have had back and forth, a bit of chatting to you guys. And we just want to show our appreciation to you for being on the front line out there. A lot of you have registered as essential workers, and we just want to say how much we appreciate that. For many other plumbers out there, they do not have the work, they need the support, and so the plumbers have reached out to IOPSA, and the Institute of Plumbing South Africa has come up with a way for you to be a part of the solution. You can donate to the Plumbers Support Fund, which is an initiative for the plumbers, by the plumbers, to assist plumbers worst affected by the COVID-19 lockdown. So for more information on that Plumber Support Fund or where you can donate, you can get in touch with us. It is on the screen at the moment. This is a great initiative by IOPSA just to help those who are being affected due to the current COVID-19 lockdown. If you want some more information, you can email support@iopsa.org. Ourselves, safety@iopsa.org, or even myself personally, chris@ohss.co.za, and we will ensure we get you that information as soon as possible. So thank you very much. If you are a part of this solution already, we really appreciate it. If you are one of those who are affected by the COVID-19 lockdown, we send our sincere apologies to you because of the current situation, and hope and trust that your situation will get better soon. Now, this morning's Toolbox Talk is the last in the series of Legionella or Legionnaire bacteria, and it is preventable. So yes, Legionnaire's disease is preventable. In fact, the point of Legionella bacteria growth and multiplying in our water systems is preventable if we have a good system in place to prevent it, which means it's really up to us. We need to take charge of the actual systems that we are installing. We also need to take charge of ensuring our clients, where this plumbing is installed, are aware of the risks and dangers that they face if their water systems are not checked periodically. In other words, if you act now, Legionnaire's disease is preventable for yourself and your clients. If you implement and maintain a good program of prevention, then it is preventable. So you need to ensure you carry out a risk assessment. You need to check if there are current solutions being used, and you need to get help if you need it. Now, the good news is we do have a beautiful toolkit for you. As we mentioned last week, we are going to be giving you some documents. This comes from the CDC, so it is from very reputable sources. They've got a beautiful toolkit on how to go about designing and implementing a risk management system. Then we've also got a very nice document, quite a lengthy document from the World Health Organization on Legionella and the prevention of Legionella. Now, it goes into a lot more broader aspects for governments to ensure that the entire country is free of Legionella bacteria in the water systems. But the practical sides of this information can assist us right on the ground when we are installing plumbing, and even if we are the user of plumbing, to ensure it is not creating a risk or an environment for this bacteria to cause a risk for us and our families. Now, Legionella can live and grow even in biofilm. So we just want to let you know that it is all around us. So as a reminder, for the last 3 sessions, if you haven't watched them, please go onto the IOPSA YouTube channel. They are there recorded and available for you to watch at any time. So what does that mean for us? What is currently being used to keep the threat away? Well, we have the SANS 893 893-1 and 893-2. These two SAN standards are the two standards that provide guidelines for the management of Legionella bacteria, as well as focusing on the requirements for designing and managing hot and cold water systems that could create or transmit this Legionella bacteria. Then we also have the water treatment and testing SAN standard. That is the SAN standard 241 drinking water specification, which states the minimum requirements for potable water to be considered safe for human consumption. Now, these requirements include microbiological, chemical, and physical properties of the water. So if you can get your hands on these standards, you can just go through to SANS or SABS and you can download them from there. I know that they do need to be purchased. I have looked for copies online, but they are not selling them at the SANS store at the moment. But if you go ahead and drop them your email address, they will keep in contact with you. Otherwise, you are out in the industry already. You are a plumber. Perhaps reach out to the other plumbers who might have the snippets of these SAN standards for you. Perhaps you've already got them as a plumber. Please follow these guidelines. Now in South Africa, we've got the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and that's where we really have our main focus, especially with these toolbox talks. And that determines what is best needed in order to keep us safe and healthy while working. And the onus really is on the owner of the business to ensure his employees are working in an environment that is healthy and safe for them, as well as for anybody who may be affected by their works. But then we also have 21 regulations that coexist with that act. So if you're working with Legionella bacteria, one of the other regulations that you can go to is the hazardous biological agents regulation, and that assists us to a degree. It's a bit vague when it comes to actual Legionella bacteria. As we mentioned before, we do not have a specific regulation that states this is what must be done for Legionella. And that is because the outbreak hasn't been so severe that we've had to have an actual regulation on it. But there are so many guidelines as well as SAN standards to provide for the risk management of Legionella. And that is where you are going to find it. Now, other things that are being used to treat this bacteria currently are temperature regulators. Many like heat tech as well on the actual heating pump systems, they do have regulators to ensure that it is in optimal temperatures already. Then something we've mentioned before is a thermostatic mixing valve. This is a genius form of engineering where the actual metal that is used either expands or contracts depending on the actual heat of the water and closes or opens depending on what is needed to keep the water flow consistent at a specific temperature. So go ahead and take a look at what is being used to keep the threat away. Perhaps you've got additional ideas of what is being used, and you can share that with us as well. We have had quite a few, but we do only have half an hour to discuss these things with you, so we do not want to take up too much of your time. But we also want to ask you, what should you really have in place? Well, there are 4 basic things that we are asking for each plumber, as well as all of you safety professionals out there and anyone listening in who may make a decision on instituting or implementing a plan like this. The 4 things that we want to ensure we have to prevent the spread of the Legionnaires bacteria is to have a Legionella prevention plan. Now, this is a document that we mentioned last week, is a plan to ensure we have in place the corrective actions after we've done a Legionella's risk assessment to ensure that we are going to effectively monitor and control the spread of the Legionella bacteria. Then the documents for yourself as a company, as well as for clients, to ensure that you are on a plan and on a not just an implementation, but a monitoring plan to ensure that these things continue. The only success we're going to receive in ensuring the prevention of Legionella is if we have that consistency. So we need to have a routine, as we mentioned last week as well, put it down on a calendar, try and stick to a routine of inspection and maintenance for this actual plan. And then a very important one is training for staff. Now, when you use the toolkit from the CDC, you will notice in there it says you do not have to have any formal risk assessment, risk management training. It is really a toolkit that will go step by step and help any person who has a basic understanding of what risks and hazards are, which I'm sure all of you already do. We understand what hazards there are in the environment. And we also understand how that risk probability will affect the outcome of our work. And now we just apply those same principles to the hazard, which is Legionella bacteria, and the risk of it spreading and infecting ourselves, our families, or our clients. So with that basic knowledge and the understanding of how plumbing should work, this toolkit really will be able to assist you. It does mention that at times you may need to get a little bit of guidance from professionals in, and that is true. Many times we get to a situation where we might need some more information, and the training for staff might be one of them. You might want to search out a training institute that can assist you and your staff to understand more about Legionella. Or you can use the toolkit and design a training manual, or use the toolkit itself as a training manual by going through it with all of your staff. Now, this would be first prize, and this would actually be a suggestion from ourselves at OHSS. The more people you involve in your company when you go through this toolkit, in order to design a Legionella prevention plan, a Legionella risk assessment, as well as instituting documents for yourself and your clients, they will understand the process, the implementation, the monitoring, and how to develop not only prevention plans in terms of health and safety, but the risk assessment idea and the methodology of identifying hazards and assessing the risk, particularly when it comes to Legionella. But the principles will not change. And so your overall health and safety status will increase because more people are involved, more people are speaking about it, more people are actually implementing this type of solution, which means that understanding and training will be continuous. So what should you have? Maybe the question we can ask is, what do you currently have? Are these four things a suitable prevention plan for you, and do you currently monitor it at the moment? Now, that CDC toolkit that we mentioned earlier, the Legionella toolkit, comes directly from the CDC, and it has been designed in connection with a health and safety company over in America. Now, the toolkit includes quite a few things, but I just wanted to mention four of them. There's a simple yes or no worksheet to determine if an entire building or parts of it are at increased risk for growing and spreading Legionella. Because the first step we want to take is, do we need a plan like this? So maybe some of you are sitting at home saying, well, do I need something like this? I've got a JoJo tank out to the back of my yard. I want to ensure that that water and the actual JoJo tank itself is being kept clean. Well, there are manufacturers' guidelines for cleaning out JoJo tanks, especially if the water that is going into it, you are not sure if it is actually clean. Well, that is a very big danger. We want to always ensure that water going inside of these JoJo tanks or any plastic tank that we might be using is always good and ready to be able to drink. If you're not using it for that, perhaps you're just using it gray water and you're just going to be watering your garden, well, also be careful, because when you use a sprinkler system, it is creating these air droplets that can be inhaled. So we want to ensure that it's not reaching a temperature for the growth of the Legionella bacteria. But in any case, we do have proper guidelines and sources from manufacturers of how to clean our JoJo tanks. If it is in a company and it is being used for drinkable water, well, the person who is in charge of the plumbing then would ensure that adequate testing of that water and the annual cleaning of those tanks are always done. And that is where you flush out the entire tank, turn it over, clean out if there's any residue or anything that is fallen to the bottom of that tank is cleaned out, sterilized, it is disinfected, and then clean water is placed back in again. And this should be done annually. Then a basic walkthrough of the elements of Legionella water management program. Now this walkthrough, I read it, and for a health and safety professional, it's very easy for me to understand. But I put myself in the feet of someone who is installing plumbing that has no idea about risk management or safety management. And it is very, very practical. It's a very easy guideline. Yeah, some of the words, maybe you might have to look them up or ask a professional, what does that mean, or how does the understanding, but it is relatively very, very simple and easy to follow. There are also a few scenarios describing common water quality problems, as well as examples of how to respond to them to reduce the risk of Legionella. And this is where we are going to find that common ground between ourselves and our client, because the scenarios that we are finding, it integrates between the plumber itself, how the plumbing is installed, what type of quality plumbing is installed, and then the different methods of installation to ensure the bacteria is not spread. But then there has to be support from the client side as well, because they might not understand the type of quality of plumbing or even the problems that they may face. And this will give you a good overview of what you might find and what you can put in place to ensure that you are preventing the spread of this bacteria. Then there are special sections and considerations for those who work in healthcare facilities. Now, this is also very important because healthcare facilities is right, we could almost say, ground zero. When you are working at hospitals or clinics where the possibility is that Legionella bacteria is going to grow, the issue that we are having is you already have people that are ill on the premises, and you might have people suffering with respiratory conditions, with TB, with HIV, and these are even more susceptible to the spread of Legionella and how they could get sick and ill. And a lot of times what happens is when you are in hospital, you might have suffered an illness, but we might not die from that illness, but something additional to that illness. So many are going into hospitals for normal surgery, fixing of bones, ligaments, but the problem is then it is not cleaned correctly, the hygiene standard, and maybe even the standard of water, especially in poorer countries out in Africa. This is where that infection then starts coming in, all because of different bacterias that are found in and around the hospital. One of them could be in the actual water. So water is extremely important, especially in a healthcare facility. And I'm sure you would agree with me, water is important for our everyday life. In fact, without water, we would not live. So it is a very, very important part of any of our risk assessment programs. So you might be asking yourself, well, where do I start? Where do I go as a plumber, as a safety professional, as a homeowner, or perhaps you are someone that is just joining in because you're interested in occupational health and safety topics? Well, here are a few things that you might look at. We're not saying that you have to do all of them, but depending on the size, depending on the type of installation you are putting in, and depending on the risk assessment that you are currently doing, maybe what you want to do is just start by implementing one or two of these things. First, identify, as it says there, a site-specific risk assessment. Is it necessary to put this plan in place? Now, for many corporations, you are going to have to put this in place. So remember, it must be an on-site risk assessment. You have to actually be physically on site to identify the risks that may be found. Now, you also need to find out the direct resources that are at higher risk in the systems as well. Perhaps like your JoJo tanks or some fountains. And one of the things we mustn't forget is a lot of fountains or water features have lights in them. And these lights, obviously they are protected by the water so that water does not get into the electrical sockets, but lights create heat. And when lights stay on for a particular amount of time, that water will start heating up during the day. Some fountains that are found in lobbies, you often have a lot of natural light coming in. This could also heat up the water. And so we want to just be careful, especially in an area where we're allowing a lot of people to come in, that we are not perhaps indirectly we're not sure that we are doing it, but heating up water to the point of increasing the bacteria, and then the fountain lets off these droplets that are then inhaled throughout the area. We also, and you'll notice this in almost all of these points, site-specific becomes the main point. It is extremely important to ensure that you are tailor-making this risk management or prevention program for Legionella to the actual system, to the actual site that you are looking at. And that must be based on an actual risk assessment. Then site-specific implementation plan, as well as a defect action log. In other words, what is going to happen should this happen? Then generate audit criteria. Now, audit criteria can come from a company like ourselves, where we come in, look at your risk assessment, and then give you an audit sheet based on that risk assessment. And the audit sheet is for an outside person, aside from the Legionella prevention program management or any person involved in that, to come out and be a third party look at and see what is actually being done in terms of this program, and then audit to make sure that it is being done correctly. You can do internal auditing as well as external auditing as well. Any remedial works that need to be done, any chemical or thermal treatments, any automated or on-demand chemical dosing. What about cleaning, disinfection, housekeeping? What schedules are being put in place for these cleaning or flushing programs? One of the things that we are maybe reminding a lot of clients of at the moment is water has been laying stagnant in a lot of institutes at the moment because of the COVID-19 breakout. Many of us are going to go back to our offices that have not been used for many weeks. Perhaps you are not going back to work right away, and it's only going to be in a couple of days or a couple of weeks' time. Well, remember, the water in those toilets, in those cisterns, or any other area has been sitting for a certain amount of time. What type of flushing programs do we have in place to keep fresh water coming in and not stagnant water that is perhaps increasing the spread of this type of bacteria? Then, as needed, on an annual basis, at least biannually, for evaporative cooling systems, your HVAC systems, monitoring and record keeping, inspection, microbiological monitoring program for on-site water, implementation of the Legionella logbook, and then annual auditing of the program and logbook as well. So these are just a few steps that we can start with. Obviously, going right to the beginning, get on site, do a risk assessment, find out what is needed, and then you can follow that toolkit or get in touch with an occupational health and safety professional that can come and assist you to do these programs. Well, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We really do appreciate it. We do have a couple of questions from last week that we are going to get back to. We did have quite a few questions. We have been discussing these with you directly over email, but we did want to mention we do have quite a bit of information on Legionella from WHO and the CDC. Now, in order to get this information to you, we'd like to ask you to please send us a mail, send us a WhatsApp, get in touch with us so that we have your email address in order to get this through to you. Now, we do have quite a few email addresses that we will respond to during the course of the day. They are very big documents, so please just be reminded that as we send it through to you, they might go into your spam folder, so please just keep checking that throughout the day. If you did not receive it and you did request it, we do apologize if we missed it, so please send us an email again saying you do want this information, and we will ensure that we get it for you. Now, coming up in the month of May, we do want to remind you that next week we are going to be looking at scalding. This is when water is way too hot, so we want to keep it at the right temperature to prevent Legionella bacteria from growing, but we also want to ensure that it's just hot enough and not too hot that it creates scalding. So what is the problem there? Why is scalding such an issue at the moment, and who is mainly affected by scalding? Then we're taking a look at hazardous substances. When we work with PVC glue, is it a hazardous chemical? Does it need an MSDS? Well, tune in on the 12th of May for that Toolbox talk. Then we're taking a look at confined spaces as a hazardous environment. What do we need to know? What type of confined spaces are there? And how should you be monitoring the risk of these confined spaces. And then lastly, we're going to be looking at registers and checklists. What type of basic registers and checklists should we have for our safety files? So thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next week. Just as a reminder, if you want to be a part of the solution, please donate to the Plumbers Support Fund, which is an initiative for the plumbers, by the plumbers, which is being directed by the Institute of Plumbing South Africa. So get in touch with us if you would like some more information.